All right, good evening, or it depends on when you're watching us. Good morning or afternoon if you're watching this later, cyber asynchronously. This is Dr. Casey Rees, and I am here tonight with my friends at the NEA, and it's my pleasure to once again share with you a night of innovation. This is our Innovative Educators series where we present to you innovative authors, innovative leaders, innovative educators in the field of education. And our goal and aspiration for these ongoing webinars is to share with you just innovative frontline things that are happening in the field of education. And this is such an exciting ongoing series. If you don't know about this series, we do these live, we interact with the audience, we connect, and then we have an opportunity to share this later and we interact with you some more. So we hope that you enjoy this presentation tonight and you enjoy the rest of it later. Once again, this is sponsored by the NEA, and the NEA has been doing some really innovative things as of late, including this kind of initiative, really doing things to support the growth and innovation of the field of education, and they're just doing some amazing things. And, you know, they have had a number of networking opportunities for educators to come together, and this is yet just another example. But tonight's opportunity is really unique. We've had lots of authors, innovators. Tonight is kind of unique. I've hosted this for over 2 years and had the chance to bring some of the top educators really on the planet. And tonight I'm really excited because normally we bring you the authors, and they tell you about their book. But tonight we're bringing you, this is really going to be unique for two reasons. We're bringing you not only the authors, but we're bringing you the educators that have driven the change that they have written about in this book. And it's so dynamic and so exciting. So if you're listening here tonight as an educator, I know you like to hear from the authors that write the book. This is going to be a night for you to hear not only from them, but again, from the people that inspired it, the educators that are serving the kids right along in the front lines. What also makes this unique is this is, for the first time, I've published 7 books and been part of this initiative. This is actually one of my books. But what's cool about this presentation is I'm not going to talk all that much. I'll be doing some talking and contributing. But again, what was so great about this book is that I connected with a dynamic group of educators and really did an amazing case study. I'll say we did a case study of an amazing school. I hope you think it's amazing. Of an amazing school district that for a generation now has had transformational results, serving kids in a really unique way. So I am a co-author of this book. And with special thanks again to the NEA, we're going to be presenting this book with my co-author, who I'll introduce in just a second. So our book is Inside PLCs at Work, and before I introduce it, one more time, I want to give thanks to Brandy Bixler, Christopher Thomas, for your leadership of the NEA and making this possible. Christopher, for keeping us all aligned and making sure we're sounding good and looking good, looking as good as we can. And Brandy, your ongoing leadership in this space and bringing us innovation with the NEA is just really appreciated. So thank you, and thank you to the NEA. So Craig, we're down to our discussion of this wonderful book. I had a chance a couple years ago to meet Craig at when I was actually visiting his school district with Solution Trees, visiting his district speaking. We had a chance to talk a little bit afterwards about the amazing things going on in his school district. And the more we talked, the more we thought we really need to put together a publication regarding this. And Craig, it seems like it was just yesterday that we were sitting down, sipping a Coke and talking about this idea. And here we are, my friend, with this book in front of us, and we're here able to talk about it. And I know you got our friends to introduce. So Craig, how about if I turn it over to you, and then at some point I'll be jumping in. But as I turn it over to Craig, really quickly, one last thing. Craig and his team will present for about 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes or so. And then afterwards, we'll be asking questions of all of you. Anybody who's participating will ask questions and take questions to kind of round out this evening. So if you have questions, there's a chat feature, and we'll be able to use it when we're done with our presentation. Craig, you're on, buddy.
Thanks, Casey, and appreciate the NEA sponsoring this as well. And I've been in Sheridan for 24 years, and I'm going to talk very briefly also, but I'm just going to set it up, and I've got some educator practitioners, and that's who we are. We practice what we preach, we live it, And I just want to tell a little bit about the story about how we got to where we are. And it's really been a journey and a never-ending journey. But before we became our PLC district, before we started this journey, we were really kind of the typical bell curve, both in teacher performance but also in student performance. And we knew we had to get better, but quite frankly, we just didn't know how. We knew that we weren't reaching all students, that all students were not learning at the level that they needed to be successful in schoolwork as well as in life. But we really needed to look at ourselves. And by looking at ourselves, we said, listen, our mission statement, like most people's mission statements in schools across the country, all children will be successful, prepared for the 21st century. All students will learn at a very high level. But quite frankly, we had to ask ourselves, how does that happen? How does that happen for us, for every child, every single day? How does that happen for every teacher and every single day? And so we did a lot of research. We researched models. We researched like merit-based pay. We researched other things that focused on vocabulary and content. And we finally found a model that basically had no excuses. And it was teacher-centered. And teacher-centered meaning that teachers every single day are at work with our children. So we believed that we needed to get to a place where our teachers were involved intensely in this work. And so what we found was the professional learning community model. And it was not a one-shot workshop. It was a journey that all teachers and all educators and staff members and paraprofessionals had to participate in. And so what we looked at is that we had to ask ourselves several questions. Who are we and what are we about? What is it about that we need to do to make sure that all children learn at a very high level? And that journey had to ask ourselves, listen, this is just not we're going to do PLCs for this hour and that hour. It is how we eat, sleep, live, and work. It's how we operate. And it's building a focus and a culture of learning. All children participate at their own learning and their own skill sets of developing into readers, writers, and mathematicians. And so we had to really decide that we had to stop the behind the closed door. We had to stop teachers and paraprofessionals running off copy. So we had to make sure that all of our teachers collaborated with each other, lifting. If we wanted to lift all boats for all children learning at a very high level where they were readers, writers, and mathematicians, we had to lift all boats for all teachers. And so we had teachers who were struggling. Well, what better way for a teacher to improve by having a colleague, another educator, help them to improve? And so we adopted the PLC model. And again, it's not okay, now we've got it, now we're done. This is a forever thing. And so our ladies here, they're going to introduce themselves. They're the practitioners. They're the ones that work at it every single day, making sure that they're collaborating, looking at student data, and basically saying to themselves, if our kids are failing, that means that we're failing. And we're very excited about being able to share this tonight, so I'll turn it over and they can introduce themselves.
Hello, and thanks for having us this evening. We're really pleased to be here to share our journey of professional learning communities and how it's impacted student learning here at Sheridan County School District number 2. We pride ourselves on being a high-performing school district with a PLC focus, and student learning is always at the forefront of every decision we make. So to start off this evening, we'd like to introduce ourselves.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Rapp, and I am the literacy coordinator and the reading recovery teacher at Henry A. Coffee.
I'm Megan Russell, and I'm a kindergarten teacher at Woodland Park Elementary.
And I'm Kristie Gariffa, the literacy coordinator here at Woodland Park Elementary. We've all had the privilege of working together in a K-5 building that was recognized as a model PLC school through Solution Tree, and we pride ourselves on holding PLC as the foundation of every decision we make here at Woodland Park. Our purpose today is to really share pieces of our journey with you from 3 different perspectives. So we have the perspective of a classroom teacher, of an interventionist, and as a literacy coach. And we're going to tie each of these pieces to this new book, Inside PLCs. And we're going to show you how we've shaped our community. And we're hoping that you can take away some usable and actionable pieces to use in your school. The bottom line is really that this book is our story. It's about what we've done, our trials and tribulations and successes and celebrations. So as we walk through this journey today, we're going to rely on the 3 big ideas of a PLC. And those are a focus on learning, a collaborative culture and collective responsibility, as well as a results orientation. And each of these pieces are really essential to the success that we've seen, and they're ingrained in everything we do. So we're going to go ahead and walk you through each of these big ideas with a lens on the journey that we've been through together. So we'll start with big idea number one, the focus on learning. With that said, we aren't focused on teaching. We aren't focused on things like field trips or excuses or even specific strategies that we think might impact student learning. But we're focused on learning and learning that's visible and actionable each and every day. In this book, Inside PLCs, on page 19, Craig and Casey venture into what exactly a PLC is. And here we know it's about the steps in the process, like Craig and Casey mentioned. So we don't focus on tools or curriculums or products. We're focused on the steps in a process of learning each and every day, learning for students and learning for teachers. And that's really what this first big idea is all about. It's about being a part of the right work. And we're going to talk more about that, the right work that we participate in each and every day. One example might be that we don't have a specific canned ELA curriculum that we use. We do, however, have a guaranteed and viable curriculum that we can guarantee each and every kid within our school and the schools across our district receive. And we do that through a balanced literacy approach combined with collaboration. And ultimately, collaboration really is our curriculum. And as a coach, I know this really requires very strong and knowledgeable teachers. And our PLC process, it creates the structures that we need to make that happen in each and every classroom. In the book Inside PLCs, they delineate three parts of this first big idea of a focus on learning. They delineate student learning as the first piece, and then these next two pieces kind of go together, which are adult learning and team learning. And Megan's going to go ahead and walk through how this first piece of a focus on learning, which is student learning, is really our ultimate goal.
Thanks, Kristie. So when we talk about student learning, we really focus on the 4 critical questions from the PLC framework. And when we focus on those questions, question number 1 states, what do we want our students to know? And with that, we are consistently identifying our essential learning targets. And through this, we do it through vertical alignment, looking at our own grade levels and our grade levels above and below us. And we really study those standards. We choose priority standards based on the core. We take the Common Core and unpack those standards and pick our priority standards, and it's really diving into what we want our students to know. And with that, it's going to be our non-negotiables. And once we've picked those priority standards or what our students need to know, we create those proficiency skills, and it really lets us come together and find what proficiency looks like. A good example of this for our districts is we meet with Jan Haig from our Marzano Research at the end of a school year and prior to the next school year. And we do vertical work. We get together with teachers from all over the district, and we look at our core standards in one core area and pick out our priority standard and what that proficiency is going to look like. And it's really district centered. And we come up with a common vision, and we follow up this work throughout the year. It doesn't stop at this summer work. We follow up and we check student artifacts, and we come back together and look at student data and see what's going well and what we can improve on. And that kind of leads us into question number 2. How will we know when the students have learned it? So we like to think of this as the backwards design. We set our goals based on our proficiency scales and standards, but we develop common assessments aligned to the priority standards and scales. So it doesn't just stop with knowing that standard. We get to develop what proficiency looks like, and we get to create these common assessments. And we continue to get together and look at student data and artifacts throughout the year. It doesn't stop. It's a continuous process. We create those rubrics, and we even create the protocol for assessments and administrations of those assessments. Some of our common assessments in our district include district benchmarks, and that happens in our core areas in writing, math, and reading. And it's all teacher created. We have the ownership over it. It's not somebody coming in and laying down something in front of us and saying, do this. It was our creation. So once we come together, we analyze. We are always analyzing and thinking about those next steps. It's a really what comes next mentality. So after we've established those learning targets and assessments are given, that kind of leads us into the next critical question as we look at student learning. How will we respond when students haven't learned it? So this is where intervention comes in. We are always looking at the learning trends from our teammates and ourselves, and we make collective decisions for interventions. And those that haven't met standard, they will receive some intense instruction and a low teacher to student ratio without missing class time. And you might ask, where do we find this intervention time without missing that class time? Well, our staff made a school-wide commitment of a 30 to 40-minute enrichment and intervention block. So everybody's schedule is included. Teachers, interventionists, support staff, we all work together as part of this team. We come together, and Kristie is actually on my team, and she's going to share a little perspective about how she, as an interventionist, helps us during the student learning process.
Right, so as a literacy coach, my role in this cycle is really multifaceted. The first piece of that puzzle is I'm a member of the team who actually participates in providing instruction to students. So I may have an intervention group or an enrichment group that I'm actually responsible for providing accelerated instruction for that group. The second piece of my role is to help with data. So like Megan said, I'm on her team, so I help with the data within that team and also school-wide. So looking at systematic ways to collect the data and to analyze the data so that we can identify trends, strengths, weaknesses, which will ultimately lead to the goals that we can create. And the final piece of the puzzle for me would be to dig into research so that I can ensure that each of our teachers has the background knowledge that they can implement in the classroom with our kids each and every day. And it really just keeps our team propelling forward with the newest research. So Jen's going to go ahead and talk about what this cycle looks like from an interventionist's role.
Yeah, so my role looks very similar to Kristie's and Megan as well. I'm a part of the team, so I'm in charge, or I take accountability for that one group, whether it's an intervention group or an enrichment group. Just because I'm an interventionist doesn't mean that I only work with students who need intervention. I do provide enrichment when needed, and it's all based on data and who we feel is the best fit. The other piece of the puzzle for me with my role on the team is to provide any insight into how to help students reach those standards quickly. Like Kristie mentioned, that accelerated learning, because we really have to make sure that we're catching them up to their peers. So my background in early reading literacy and literacy practices helps provide insight into what other groups can do to help those students make that accelerated growth. And then I also work with students K-5, so I can see the progression across the school and provide my insight into what other grades are trying and where they need to go, and maybe where the holes are and which holes are big ticket items and which ones that we can kind of overlook.
Thank you. So you've heard us talk about the intervention side of it, and it doesn't stop there with our students. So that leads us into question number 4. What will we do if our students already know it? Our learning doesn't stop. In the book it says high-performing students deserve more than just having to simply work quietly while teachers prepare those who haven't met standards. So our school actually came up with WIN. It's what I need. It's a personalization of this whole process. So it's really about what each and every student needs to be successful. Ultimately, the main goal for all of our learners is to reach their full potential. So high achievers are not just going to sit there and wait for everybody to catch up. They're going to dive into those standards deeper, those priority standards, and up the rigor with their learning. So this also stands true for adult and teen learning and the PLC framework. And Jen's going to tell us about how we can focus as adults on the 4 critical questions and continuously reflect on that PLC process.
Thank you, Megan. So like Megan mentioned, adult and teen learning is very similar to student learning. And we believe in Sheridan County School District number 2 that all students need a strong foundation in whatever we're teaching them. So in the book, Casey and Craig talk about this Jenga game. And in a Jenga game, the foundation, as the game is being played, becomes weaker and weaker until the tower crumbles. Well, in Sheridan, we made it a point to say that we are not going to let the students have a weak foundation. So as Megan talked about, we ensure that they're not by having things in place for them when they need intervention, such as WIN, or if they need that enrichment, WIN is also that time. But we also implement this through other ways, such as vertical alignment and book studies. So I'll start by talking about our vertical alignment. And one way that we vertically align, like Megan talked about, is through the summer. But another embedded way that we vertically align our standards is through our after-school PD. And what this looks like is we choose a core area and we think about which standards we want to start with. So we pick a priority standard, and K-5 looks at that standard and they unpack it and they think about what their instruction looks like. What does proficiency look like? What are the assessments that they've used? And as they're meeting, then they meet with the grade level before them and talk that over with them. And they notice trends between the 2 grade levels. They may notice holes, and that just brings awareness to those areas, which then helps the team reflect and refine their instruction so that K-5, we don't have any of those holes and we create that strong foundation. Another way is through book studies. And our book studies are based on enhancing our instruction. So book studies are typically chosen by the team based on what they need, and that drives their learning right there. So if they are working on writing instruction and feel like they just need a little bit more, a book study may come in place. Now again, these book studies are embedded into the day, so they typically take place during our PLC meetings. And through those book studies, we engage in meaningful dialogue, and we're really critical consumers. So as we're reading, we're thinking about what's going to work well for us and maybe things that we don't agree with. And as we dive into these book studies, we're thinking about how can we immediately implement what we're reading and try these practices right away. So for example, a 2nd grade group was working on book introductions for guided reading. And they read an article, and as they were reading the article, they were thinking about their instruction and their book introductions. So they went back into their classrooms, and they began writing the book introductions based on this new learning. And that next day or the next week, they started to video those book introductions. And they brought that back to the PLC, and as a team, reflected on how their instruction has changed from that book study or that article study. Another great added bonus to the book studies is that we are able to use this to help us move on the salary schedule. So we will receive 1 college credit, which then helps us on that. The next piece of the adult and teen learning is the collaborative reflection. And as Megan talked about, we're always using that student data to help us reflect, which then in turn helps us be better educators. We're thinking about what did we do that went well and what didn't go well, and how are we going to change it the next time. So we're learning from each other. I think the most powerful piece is collaborating and really learning from not only our teaching partners, but also literacy coaches, interventionists, support staff always have great things to offer. And it's really about all learning together and working together, which really leads us into the big idea number 2.
Jen talked about our professional development focus really being one of collaboration and embeddedness in every other thing we do throughout the day, which is the second big idea, a collaborative culture and collective responsibility. One great example is recently I was in a meeting with a few school board members in our 4th grade team, and the school board member was reflecting after hearing about the process that our 4th grade team undertakes, and she said, gosh, how has this really impacted your workload lately? Those of you who have been teaching for a long time, remember when you didn't have to do all of this PLC stuff? And the 4th grade team kind of paused and looked at each other, and then one of them said, actually, it's really lessened our workload. Now I'm not behind a closed door by myself trying to figure out how to reach every student. Instead, I have this team who's working with me and is equally responsible. We hold a collective responsibility for each and every one of our students. And for me, that was really an eye-opening moment that this is truly the right work that we're partaking in. With that said, we really pride ourselves on everyone reaching their full potential. So to do this as teachers, it's critical that we really need each other. So silos don't work, closed doors don't work. We need each other. Each and every member of our team is important to all of us reaching our full potential. So one example of this might be before school even starts, every year our staff sits down and takes a look at our mission, our vision, and each of our collective commitments to revise and edit those pieces reflectively together. And that process really reminds us why we're here. Why the work we're doing every single day is so critical. It shows us where we've come from and where we're headed, and ultimately it creates a sense of group accountability. So we have clarity and a far better understanding of the work that we're planning to do every day. Right off the bat, it creates no isolation. So we're in this together, and we're in this to improve as a team. So that's really our culture and our responsibility. And this process really removes shaming right from the start. I read an article recently where the author stated something along the lines of, you really don't have to be a bad teacher to get better. And understanding that feedback and having a partner with stronger data, none of those things are really a sign of being a bad teacher. If Megan and I are a team, and at the end of our pre-teaching cycle and our pre-assessment, we see that it's obvious that Megan's kids far outperformed mine, it doesn't mean that I've done something wrong or that I'm a bad teacher. It simply means that I have something to learn from Megan. And as a team, it's Megan's responsibility to open her door and teach me the pieces that I'm missing, and then help me in providing the interventions for those students who didn't quite make it under my watch. So that collective responsibility and collaborative culture really just ties us together in that first big idea of a focus on learning. So to create this culture, we really have to hold a strong mindset, and it's a mindset of just doing whatever it takes. And Megan's going to speak to that mindset.
I'm going to start with a quote that came from the book. Educators who accept the notion of collaborative culture and collective responsibility don't refer to students as yours or mine, but rather refer to the students and challenges as ours. As an educator, I think this is a beautiful thing. I feel like I am never alone. And in our district, we are consistently getting together to make those improvements. We don't follow a curriculum. We follow our students, and we work together to do that. As Kristie said, we're continuously reviewing and refining, looking at that data and seeing where we can go next. It is that whatever it takes, what comes next mentality. We never stop focusing on the details or focusing on that essential learning. So some examples of this is I am able to do those teacher observations. As Kristie said, if we are teaching partners and her data is blowing mine out of the water, I can go into her room and say, what are you doing? It's an open door policy, and that consistently takes place. Our doors are always open, and we always are having people in and out of our classrooms. We also have our consistent PLC meetings once a week. It's really a non-negotiable. We get together once a week. We talk about student data. It's a collective responsibility. It's our students, not theirs and mine. And we really take that reject, talk, and embrace action kind of mentality. Our teamwork directly impacts what we do in the classroom. It's always purposeful. It's never something just thrown in. Our district has become accustomed to sharing data and observing one another. And you might think, like, I don't want my data out in front of everybody, but really once it's out there, that's how we grow. That's how we learn from one another. It really is a beautiful thing. It's not a scary thing. We are our greatest resource. I have some of the most outstanding teachers right in this very building. Kristie is an exceptional reading teacher, and I've learned so much from her just because I'm able to go in and observe and learn. And, you know, she feels like her students are my students and my students are her students. We are consistent, like I said, we're consistently doing that. School observations, videos, we share videos across with each other, and we even do that behind the glass kind of format. The collective responsibility comes when we do our collective responsibility, we are consistently creating and administering and analyzing data with each other. It's our data. You will hear us say over and over again, it's about us, not about me or I. So comparably to our grade level teams, we also do our vertical teams. As I had talked before, we get together at the end of the school year, but we also get together throughout the school year and work on that vertical alignment. It's just another way to ensure that there's accountability with each other, but also that communication. It really is a whatever it takes mentality. Jen is going to speak more on the adult side of it.
Yeah, so like Megan and Kristie talked about, that collective responsibility is a huge piece when we're thinking about our students. So Kristie mentioned that we start every year by re-looking at our mission. And this is an example of Woodland Park's mission statement. And before we refined this, it talked about just students reaching their full potential. And as a staff, we decided that we needed to include the adults as well. So we changed that to everyone to reach their full potential. And we do feel like that we need to push everyone to reach their full potential, and that we're this community. We're all working together, which speaks to that they're our students, like Megan talked so much about, so we don't feel alone. And as an interventionist, this is really comforting as well. As a classroom teacher, it's comforting, but as an interventionist, when you're in charge of helping students make accelerated growth, it becomes even more stressful thinking about how you're going to do this on your own. Well, we don't believe that here. We think that the collaboration between the classroom teacher and the interventionist is key to ensure that these students make accelerated progress. So for example, one way that we do this is through reading recovery communication log, where the reading recovery teacher and the classroom teacher are given, or they have a document, and they record notes based on their lesson observations, texts that the students are reading, things that they are having trouble with. And this teacher and the interventionist are in constant communication about these hardest to teach students to ensure that they're using the same language, that they're on the same page, that they're noticing the same things. And sometimes it just takes a little, how do you notice the student doing this? That will completely change the instruction for the student. And as a former classroom teacher and an interventionist, this is so comforting to know that we have each other and that we're always working with each other. I actually had the opportunity today to go watch one of my reading recovery students in the classroom. And it was so insightful to see not only what he was doing in the classroom setting, but also how he was interacting with the teacher. And I learned so much from them. So thinking from my spot, I'm always learning by those observations. And I feel like my colleagues as well, we're all learning from each other, which gives us that sense of having that collaborative culture. And we all have that responsibility that we have to work together to ensure that all of our students are meeting their full potential.
It's interesting because when Jen said everyone, we really mean everyone reaching their full potential. So every member of our team, including ourselves, including our paraprofessionals, including our principals, we're looking for everyone to be meeting their full potential. And that leads us right to this results orientation, which is the third big idea. On page 30 of Inside PLCs, Craig and Casey talk about how professional learning communities must focus more on data and less on feelings. And that really reminds me of a year at Woodland Park where we had to change our motto to no assumptions. It became a norm. It became a commitment that we all made to ourselves and to our teammates. So anytime we found ourselves or our teammates assuming proficiency, saying something like, I think they could have done it on a different day, or I don't think they can, or I think they may be able to, we just simply said no assumptions. And that really became ingrained in everything we do at Woodland Park. It became just a piece of our PLC puzzle. Megan talked about the 4 critical questions, and we use those 4 critical questions for our very own accountability. This relates back to the book. On page 70, they mention the ownership mentality that a PLC creates. This collaboration has created our very own accountability. We discover what we do well. We discover what we don't do so well. We're able to act on it all because of our results orientation. We don't need a principal or an administrator with some shiny new ball coming to try and propel us forward. We can see it in our results. We see what needs to happen and we're able to act on it as a team. So we look for this improvement and we act on it. PLC is always our next shiny ball because this learning is visible due to our results orientation. So we just simply ask ourselves, how can we make our team stronger? We ask ourselves what next, and what's next, and Jen's going to go ahead and speak to the mentality of what's next.
Yeah, so one way that we think about this data is starting with setting our goals. And in the text on page 44, there's an example of a 4th grade SMART goal. And so the teams are the ones creating the goals. They don't come from an administration, they come from the teams based on what their students need. The team sits down and they come up with a plan. They think about the resources they're going to need to ensure that they meet this goal. So the example in the text is a 4th grade team, and their goal that they set based on last year's data, both of those students coming in and their students leaving, was to set a 90% proficiency for their students in reading based on the benchmark assessment. And when they set that goal, they think about, okay, what do we need to do to ensure that we get 90% of our students to that proficiency level? So they decide what the instruction in class is going to look like. What's going to happen when students aren't making accelerated growth, or if they need to make accelerated growth, what are we going to do? What are we going to do if they've met that goal already and it's, October? So they think about all of this. They also think about what resources they might need. That's where the book studies come in. They also touch base with literacy coordinators and interventionists to think about what can they do to ensure that they're going to meet this goal. Now they're checking on that goal throughout the year. So at the end of the year, when that final benchmark assessment is given, there's truly no surprises. I think the one thing that we do really well in this district is that there are no surprises. We know our students inside and out because we're always collecting data and always observing them and learning from them. And so we're not surprised if a student is well above proficiency, if they're right there, or if they're going to be below proficiency. And so this is just one way that they are setting goals, but really the goals never stop. Once they've reached one goal, a new one comes to the forefront. As Megan talked, when we use those win cycles, each win cycle has its new goal. And so we're never done. We kind of live that we're always in refinement. We're always thinking about what do they need to know and then what's next.
So as an educator, being results oriented, we are having a commitment to those results. We develop the skills and the confidence and the pride in our process. So being results oriented doesn't just stop at the collection of data. We really process it and analyze it and make the plans for the next steps with us and our students. We continually collect learning artifacts and take actions from those results. Right now, we're in the middle of a PLC win cycle where we're looking at the standard retelling familiar stories. Now, our data was good, but it wasn't where we wanted it to be or where we knew our kids could go. So we kind of went back to that question one, what do we want our students to know? We looked at our results. We were happy with those results, but we knew that we could up the rigor a little bit. So we went back to that question one, asked ourselves what proficiency looks like to us. And right now we're in the middle of that process and excited about the learning that's coming from our little kids. We're re-identifying that learning target based on that results orientation. And as Jen and Kristie have also said, in that win cycle, sometimes those students don't meet that proficiency goal at the end of the cycle. So we are looking at those results and going back and asking ourselves what we can do. Right now, Kristie and I are sharing a student, and he's an ELL student, and we are sharing that data, consistently looking at, running records and what this student does with her. We're sharing that vocabulary and just really upping the rigor for that student. So we're pushing him beyond where he could be. So it's never a new thing for us, but rather just building on the systems that we have in place. It's a refinement. It's a never-ending, continuous process. The book states, as a results orientation allows teachers to closely examine achieved results and what those results mean for next steps. It's really about the process and enjoying that process and knowing that it comes from us. Our goal and mentality is student success, no matter what.
Right. I think it's obvious from us digging into each of these pieces that none of these big ideas stand alone. A focus on learning, our collaborative culture, and this results orientation all go together. They're integrated pieces of a really complex learning puzzle that we live each and every day. For us, PLC is not some meeting that we go to or a common planning time or giving a common assessment, but it's a system that we have in place of continuous improvement. This year at Woodland Park, we were challenged with a new principal after having years of the same fearless leader. And lo and behold, our process continued. Teams convened, goals emerged, and we hit the ground running without question. We hold this loose system with choices of things like how you're going to teach. If Megan and I want to teach differently, that's an okay thing because we have this results orientation that's going to show us what's actually working to impact student learning. We hold a loose system of things like materials that we want to use, or even our scope and sequence is our choice. But we're also tight on some things. So these 3 big ideas and providing consistent intervention and enrichment for each and every one of our students in a real systematic way, kindergarten through 5th grade. And we're also tight on ensuring that we're developing ourselves continually with the ultimate goal of student learning in mind. So we know we live in this information age where data is really easy to come by, but the data is not what's going to impact student learning. It's what we do with it that's really going to impact our students' learning. And so we thank you for listening to these pieces of our story. And with that, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Casey with some questions.
All right. Well, and if you guys don't mind, and for those listening in, I may add a thought or two just because, this book was such a pleasure to write. But ladies, thank you. And Craig, thank you for a really wonderful presentation. For those of you listening in, and I know many of you listening in are active union members. You're members of the NEA who are working, you're part of your professional association. You're working hard to make sure that teachers and educators are treated in a way that's professional, where they're recognized for their efforts. And one of the things that I have been pushing for many years as both a teacher and then administrator, and now as somebody who gets to do what I do in terms of writing books, is I don't know of anything more empowering for teachers than the PLC process. Because what it ultimately does for teachers is that the process is built in the school that literally makes it impossible to ignore the feelings, the aspirations, the thoughts, the ideas, the creative energy of teachers. What's amazing about our organizations as schools is sometimes they can dehumanize us. They can make us feel like numbers. We've got, I was a principal of a huge high school, and before we did our PLCs, there were 24 English teachers and another 19 math teachers, and it would be easy to slot people in. But with the PLC, you wind up becoming individuals who work together. And by the way, you have great individuality because teachers advocate for what they believe. In fact, the ladies in the room, I'm sure that as synchronous as you can be, you probably disagree on some things. And that's awesome because that's what a PLC is all about. So, so as you're listening in as a good consumer of this thought leadership, I hope that you're thinking about it, and I hope at your school that you're embracing it. I know in some cases, some districts have seen the implementation of PLCs as sort of this administrative oversight, that this is something that administrators are trying to get teachers to do, and that might be in the execution. That could be happening. I'm not denying that. But what we've observed is, and what I've observed that makes me so excited as coming from a family of educators and spending my whole career there, is that this is a model that I don't know of a better way to empower teachers. I don't know of a better way for teachers to have the kind of autonomy that frankly we're even searching for here in coming together and creating a community of practice digitally right here than to use the PLC. The other thing I'll just share with you, that might make you smile, I do a fair amount of work with leaders. I work with leaders, school leaders, superintendents, principals, and I've actually worked with some leaders outside of education. And what's really interesting, if you study what makes an effective leader, is they understand that you've got today, especially in a highly technical world, you have to turn you have to turn the decision making, you have to turn the innovation, you have to turn the actual really frontline innovation of your company, we'll say, to the people who are working on the front lines. And I've worked with some CEOs of companies that weren't educators who, and I remember telling them, even if you don't like people, you need to build systems where people on the front lines who are actually doing the work are making the decisions. That's really common practice in the most competitive businesses, in the most competitive nonprofits, and indeed in the most competitive schools. And the only way you can really do that, though, is to do it with structure. And I don't know of any other way other than, I mean, there probably are other ways, but the best way I know how, and the way that frankly has been the most widely researched, the most comprehensively chased and analyzed, is through PLC. So I hope that this book and analyzing this book and thinking about it tonight, I hope that you do the following. I hope that if you're an educator, that you pick up the book or a book about PLCs and read about PLCs and see if it would be right for your school. Because actually using the model, I'm convinced if you use the model with fidelity, and by the way, this school district used it with infinite fidelity, which is why they're so special. But if you use it even with some fidelity, you'll see some changes. Where I was a high school principal, we used it, and we didn't have the decades of experience, and we didn't have the wisdom of implementation. But what we did have was commitment, and we immediately saw much better results and opportunities to grow together in becoming a community of practice. So I hope you were inspired tonight. Ladies, I want to ask you a couple questions because, again, Craig and I had the great opportunity to write this book, but it was a great writing experience because we got to turn it over to the people that were on the front lines actually doing it, and that was a great thing. And Craig gave great leadership in making that happen and really living that. Lots of superintendents talk that way, and he actually lived it. But talk to me about educator empowerment. In doing this work, if you're an NEA member and you're scratching your head saying, I've heard of PLCs, I know a little bit about it. Tell me how PLCs, if implemented at a high level, really honors what it means to be an educator or a teacher, and how does it really empower you?
I'd say this is kind of multifaceted. So the first piece is we can see it working. The results are visible. We see how our students are performing on pre-assessments. We see our practice changing and the practice of our colleagues changing, and we see student learning impacted. I mean, bottom line is we see it working, and I think you walk into education hoping to make a difference. And so when you can visibly see that it's actually making a difference for even those hardest to reach kids in our classrooms, that's empowering in itself. Secondly, I think that I talked about this loose system with some tight things, and the loose pieces are really what teachers thrive on, being able to be creative. We don't have a curriculum that we have to turn the page and do the next lame lesson, but we actually get to decide what's going to be best for our kids and do that in our classrooms with our team by our sides. So I would say that's the next piece that's really empowering, because we're able to be selective about how we teach and the way we teach, and even what we teach and what order we teach it in. But ensuring proficiency and ensuring that those three big ideas are present in everything we do, and ensuring our consistent growth, those are the things that we're tied on. So I feel like our choices is a big piece of that empowerment as well.
Yeah, and as Kristie mentioned, it's really student driven, so every year is going to look different. There's not just the same roadmap that we take every year, but really the teachers are going with the children every year. And so that keeps things fresh. I think that helps with really burnout, because every year you don't know what you're going to expect, so you don't get routinized. And you're learning so much from your students every year and from each other that it keeps things fresh and light, and you get to enjoy working with each other because every year is different.
Mm-hmm. We get to own our process. It's teacher created. So like Kristie and Jen said, we revel in that.
So let's talk a little bit about affiliation, and because again, with the NEA and the state and local affiliations, one of the great advantages of being part of those organizations, and I remember as a rep myself, is that we had affiliation. In many cases, as teachers, you get isolated, as we talked about, but with our association, we felt affiliation. What my experience has been with the PLCs is that it creates a level of affiliation where people get to know each other at a much deeper level, at a level that people can't even imagine, because you have a chance to really experience each other. Tell me a little bit more about how, because some of you have been in it probably so long, you probably don't, maybe this has just been your lived experience, but what does it do for affiliation and friendships and connection and getting to know each other and just really knowing one another at a deeper level? How does the PLC process do that?
I can start with this, because I actually did not start my teaching career in Sheridan. So when I got here, it was just magical to me that we were able to work so closely together with interventionist principals and even across the school district. So it was really fun, that affiliation with everybody. Even with Craig, comes in and he is present. There's a level of presence in our district. It's never a closed door policy. So it was really exciting for me to come in and, being a team player that I am, be able to work together with some of the best resources that I've ever seen in my educational career.
I'd say also, I think PLC creates a version of vulnerability in that each and every one of us is in this team process together. And so, for example, my position, I'm the literacy coordinator or the literacy coach, who I think in some districts is perceived as the person who should know all, and should you have a problem, go to that person and they shall fix it for you. But instead, in our school district, I'm a member of the team. And so, I've taught tons of lessons in Megan's room that we've sat down at the end and talked about all the things that I should have done differently. So I think that sense of vulnerability really brings us closer together. We'll have parents and staff members from other buildings as well come into our school and say, it just feels good here. I mentioned we got a new principal, and that's one of the things that for the first 3 months of school that she kept saying, it feels good here. People just fit together and feel good, and that doesn't happen by accident. It happened because we work together all the time.
And embrace the process.
Right. Yeah. And I think it creates a level of trust, and we are all very close. And so we all trust each other because we've been vulnerable with each other, and we have been professional with each other, and we're understanding. And so we all trust each other that if I'm going to put my data up there, good or bad, I know that I can trust this group to help me get better without talking about, oh gosh, her data is bad. So we all, are vulnerable at that point, and then that just kind of builds our relationships from there.
Right. And I also was thinking of this your success is my success mentality, that truly if one member of our team isn't successful, we've all failed because we're in this together. So that's one piece that I'm constantly saying to people, no, your success is my success, so I need this to work for you. What can we do to make this work out?
And let me add to that, and just to give some educators some perspectives on this, and some of you may know this already, but I remember I loved being a teacher. And then when I became an assistant principal, I loved that too. I got to work with kids and families, and it was an awesome experience. And suddenly I had to evaluate teachers, and I suddenly was in a position to observe all this teaching. And I remember saying, I just didn't know what my colleagues were doing. When I was a teacher, I didn't work under a PLC, and I had no idea what my colleagues were doing. I could kind of listen a little bit what was going on next door. But with a PLC model, the beautiful thing is, what your colleagues are doing. When you talk about getting to know each other, this isn't just, getting to know each other in a social setting at church or anything like that, but it's getting to know each other at a deeper and more profound level, and really knowing how one another teaches. I would have been such a better teacher had I had a colleague who could say, you're doing what? And let me help you. And what you're doing what? And can I borrow that? And you don't get a chance to do that. And it really struck me as an assistant principal. I thought to myself, I've learned so much from observing all these teachers, and I'm doing the job as an assistant principal. I wasn't there to help. And what you do in the PLC is you get a chance to actually live that in a much more, really in a much more profound way. Rolling it forward too, and ladies, I'm going to ask you to reflect on this a second, so endure my real short story. But another experience, and this isn't in the book, but another experience I had, I remember as an associate principal later on. I remember going to a new school, and I had to evaluate a lot of teachers in this position. And this wonderfully prepared, mastered, credentialed teacher, so professional, sat down with me at the pre-conference, and she said, so you're going to be coming in to see me. What do you consider good teaching, and how do you kind of want me to teach? And she was the sweetest person and the kindest person. And my heart was like, I just appreciate the deference she was giving my position and me. But I said to her, if you have to reinvent yourself every time that you're evaluated, you're going to be pretty busy in your career. Why don't we together figure out as a district what good teaching is? And I think the best person who knows about seventh grade art, I think it was 7th grade art. It was. Is you know so much more about that than I do. You're the expert. And I think with PLCs, what we really do that is we get away from this notion of, I don't care if it's a professor or a principal or a lead teacher. We come together in this community of expertise where the experts are right there and you're recognized in this district. It's really up to you. Guys, tell me something about that. Tell me something about how, as a teacher in a PLC, you really begin to really emerge as the leader in that particular area for sure.
I guess I have a story from here recently that I think would connect to that. We have a new 1st grade team. So one's a new member, one's a new teacher, and one's been in there for a couple of years. And they kind of took this year on as trying to do everything the same, which I think a lot of people perceive PLC as they're trying to make us all teach the same way. And so they were very fine-tooth comb planning every single lesson together. And like I mentioned, we got a new principal this year, and a piece of her feedback for that team was, I want you guys to try it the way that you feel like it's going to be best for your students. And so they all, took a step back and then forged their own path, pretty similar but in different ways. And this new system of their writing workshop emerged. And then the very next PLC meeting, they said, thank you for that challenge, because now we have this new system for our writing workshop that's going to work great for all of us. And had we stuck to this notion of having to do everything exactly the same, we never would have known what actually worked for our kids. So I think it's creating you as an individual teacher, but also as a team. So we've talked so much about teams, but I think you're able to develop as an individual teacher with your very own strengths through that process as well.
And as a new literacy coach this year, I've had a lot of conversations with teachers like, well, just tell me what to do. And we've had conversations like, it's what's best for your kids. And I don't know your kids. I can give you ideas, but really giving them and empowering them, like, you are the expert. You know what to do. And if you can justify why you're doing it based on what you're noticing, go with that. And we can work together. And I think that's been a good springboard, like Kristie said, that challenge to say, yeah, I am the expert. I do know what's best for my kids has really shown us some great growth. And I think that teachers are feeling more empowered when they know, yeah, I am the most knowledgeable person with my students, and I can always get better, but I know my students better than anyone else. And so giving them that sense of like, okay, I'm going to start with what I feel first and then pull in others when needed. I think it's great.
Yeah. We have common ideals. It's not that we're doing everything verbatim with each other. It's just kind of fun to see how I do it differently than Kristie or Jen, and we're each able to bring something to the table in that collaborative kind of community. So,
right, we're able to see right in front of us what's actually working with our students. Yeah. I think that's the critical component.
And I want to add to that, what you guys are observing and hearing, if you're listening, and again now or later, Sheridan County School District number 2 is a school district like almost every other. I've had a chance to visit thousands of school districts over the years, and every one of them, there are educators there that you pray your kids were in front of them. This district is no different. But what's so amazing is that they've really had extraordinary results. And not just, of course, academically, but they have so many amazing results. It's an amazing place to work. Visitors show up and they're delighted to see it and delighted to be there and excited, and they can feel the energy. And we write about that in the book, that visitors have come in and they feel like people are working so hard, but working with great joy. And if you're listening tonight, you can see that great joy is on the faces and in the words and on the smiles. And virtually everybody I talked to from Sheridan was like that, including their superintendent, which we haven't heard from, Craig, in a minute here. We're getting ready to wrap up here. I'd love to hear as we wrap up here within our final minute or so. Craig, are you able to get back on the line here?
Sure, Casey. The power of this, and that's why you don't hear from the superintendent, is hear the joy and the collaboration by our teachers, and that this is who they are and this is what they do. It's not something that they make up. It's something that they're totally engaged in terms of the discussion is always about how the student is learning their own, like connecting to the way the child learns. And that whole process is so complex and so interesting, but they do it through this really rich collaboration. And that's the power of that. And that's why we wanted to make sure that these ladies were able to say, this is who we are, this is how we live, this is how we breathe, this is how we operate every single day. And they do it with joy and with passion.
Greg, you know, and you do a wonderful job of giving credit, and we both do to the people in your district. But you had the wisdom to also support all this along the way, and as somebody that worked alongside you on this book, not everybody's doing that. So that's you're to be congratulated too for all this, to have having the wisdom in many cases to lead, and in some cases to get out of the way, which I know at times we both have to do. Craig, what's something that you learned from this experience? I mean, you wound up having to put a white lab coat on, looking at your own district and looking at this concept. Tell me something that you learned about this, about yourself and about your district and about this concept that maybe you didn't know before you wrote this book.
Well, I learned that the power is the teacher and the parents that are involved, because we don't have parents make copies. We involve them in the instruction of our kids. And the power is just how rich this whole thing is. It's an forever journey, and it's always about getting better as a teacher through that collaboration process, and about how our children are so adept at, they know where they are in their learning, they know what they need to do, they understand that in mathematics we have all these different algorithms, and that they own that learning. They are empowered as readers, writers, and mathematicians, and the power of it was that it is just not one grade in a classroom or in this school. It is K through 12 through our whole system. And that's the power of it, and that we don't make excuses. We love learning ourselves, and we love the fact that our teachers are empowered to be the professionals that they are, and the power in seeing every single day children reaching new levels that no one ever dreamed of before.
Well, Craig, thanks so much for that. And the whole Sheridan team, thank you. We are at the top of our hour. We do a pretty good job of actually sticking to our times, even though we're a minute or two over tonight, though. But ladies, thank you for sticking around late tonight and giving up some time with your families. Guests tonight, thank you for coming. I want to thank the NEA once again, Brandy and Christopher for being here for us and helping put this together. And all of you will get a wonderful YouTube link from this, and we'll get to push that out all over social media, and I'm sure we'll get hundreds of thousands of hits, and you'll get fan letters. But that was really awesome. But everybody, thank you so much for tonight. Joy as always to work with you. Brandy, thank you, Brandy, for that message as well. Guys, have a great night. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.